And welcome back to another episode of The Credit Authority. Once again, I am your host, Rhonda Kulch, and we always want to start by thanking our sponsors. So thank you so much to Equity First. If you are experiencing credit and or financial challenges, feel free to reach out to any one of their trained professionals. They are nationwide, bilingual, and looking forward to taking your call. They can be reached at 631-714-4822. And we are going to move into our next guest. So we have a recurring guest, attorney friend of mine, Dennis McGrath. But today, we brought along his partner who we never get the opportunity to spend time with, and that is John Klaus. How are you, boys?
Good morning. How are you, Rhonda? Good to see you again.
So
doing well.
Let's talk about real estate today. I know we bring you guys on, but enlighten me. Let's talk about something fun and sexy like foreclosures.
Oh, that's always fun.
So there's two sides of that, right? It's the side of the homeowner that unfortunately is going through financial struggles, right? And then you have the flip side where we have our investors, and the investors are really looking forward to seeing what the market has in store. So let's start with the fact that your law firm does a lot to help clients on Long Island that are experiencing foreclosure.
We do. Actually, that's one of the main focuses of our law firm. We do a lot of real estate based type of transactions, and one of those, unfortunately, is the sadder side of real estate, which is the foreclosure. You know, for whatever reason, somebody gets into financial trouble, they're not able to pay their mortgage, and it goes over time that the bank has to foreclose on that loan. So what you do at that point is you need to have an attorney that's going to protect your rights on that. Because what ends up happening, a lot of people ignore the foreclosures when they get the paperwork because they're already overwhelmed by the fact that they haven't paid on this and they know that they can't pay it. But what ends up happening on that is it speeds up the process and it gives the bank has their attorneys. They're going to get you out of that house very quickly. So therefore, Mr. Klaus and I, what we end up doing is we take the bank back to court and we fight for your rights on that. What we can end up doing on that are one of a few things. One does give you a positive outcome in that we refinance that loan. We find a way to get the bank to take money and put that at the back end of the loan so that you don't have to have an onerous payment and you get to stay in your house. And it could be that back payment, that back balloon payment is one that'll never be paid because you're not going to get there. Let's say you're a 70-year-old.
You're so negative equity.
Well, it's negative equity. Or let's say even by age, because realistically, I mean, I don't know about you, Rhonda, or you, John, but I'm not expecting to live beyond 100. Perhaps I am. But let's say you're a 70-year-old and you're falling on these hard times because you can't pay that. So what we'll end up doing is we'll see if we can get the bank to take a large portion of that loan that has now been delinquent, put it on the back end of a 30-year loan so that you now pay your mortgage payment, a smaller payment over time. And on that 30th year, you could either refinance for that amount that's done, that's due to them, or at that point you can you sell the property. But we give you options in order to get out. We also, though, try and save if we can't save the home, then, and because it's not always feasible in every case, what we end up doing at that point is fighting for you to keep you in there as long as possible.
I think what happens, and I see this with my clients, including the clients that we work on together, is really making sure that you have a thorough expectation of what is going to happen. You do get those clients that are 70 that may have just fallen behind, or maybe their taxes were the problem, not necessarily the mortgage. Expenses have gone up. So you have to almost also be in a position to set realistic expectations to what they can afford.
You have to manage the expectations. Am I right there?
I was just going to say that's probably one of the most important things. We're part-time counselors as well because we look at the overall picture.
You say counselor, but you mean therapist. I know.
Therapist,
I'm following along with you.
Yeah, exactly. And work out a realistic solution because if, we don't work it out the right way, it's a couple of years down the road, they're going to be in the same boat. So
we have a situation right now. We had a client come in a couple of weeks ago who has a house that's honestly, I hate to say falling apart, but it really is. His stove doesn't work. One of the bathrooms in the house needs totally to be gutted. He's in a bad situation on this, and he's in foreclosure. And what will end up happening on an individual like this, and his only source of income currently is Social Security. So he's not going to be able to pay his mortgage, even if we refinance based on the amount of money that's owed on this. But what we can do for somebody like this is we can get other investors to come in to take this house under what's for him and give him actually equity so that he can go into a place that he can afford, whether it's rental or something like that. Otherwise, what he's doing is wasting away his equity in that house. And there's going to come a point, and it comes very quickly when you do the math with the taxes that are owed and insurance and missed payments, that your equity is eaten away so quickly you're left with zero. And then what do you do?
100%. And that's a great way to segue to where we started, which was talking about the foreclosures and how that looks for the investor. I think what happens is there's a point in time where somebody has to, and I say this to clients all the time, you don't want to make that house feel like every moment is now a burden. You want to remember everything that was positive. So a lot of times we'll talk about the exit strategy, and selling a property to an investor could, in a scenario like this, be the best case for that client. You don't have people walking through your house. You're getting a fair offer. We say fair, right? Because, it's still a business at the end of the day, the way that the numbers break down. They are able to help the homeowner with their transition. So you don't have somebody, it's an investment, right? So it's not where somebody is selling a home to move into that home and you're relying on both sides of the transaction to be compliant.
Well, and also one other thing, Rhonda, and something I want to stress to the listeners out there, is if you are in this situation, if you are in foreclosure and you're saying to yourself, I don't need an attorney because I owe more on this house than this house is worth. We have people that come in that the house is worth $500,000, but they owe the bank $700,000. So they say, you know what, I'll just ride it out and stay in here as long as possible. The problem with that is once it goes to auction, that bank can actually come back to you for the amount, the difference between what they ended up selling this house at auction and the amount you owed. So that's another reason you need an attorney to protect your rights on that.
They call that deficiency judgment.
That's exactly a deficiency judgment. And on the deficiency judgment, we can get the bank to waive the deficiency judgment if we can do something that's called a short sale. And the short sale basically is an agreement with the bank that we say we are going to sell this house and we are going to leave. And we might even be able to get that individual moving money from the bank, get them a lump sum, $5,000, $10,000 to leave that house, so that we don't have to keep fighting it in court, but the bank then agrees to not come after them for the deficiency, for the difference between what they get at auction and what that house is actually owed on that loan.
Which I think is important, because ultimately if somebody doesn't take accountability and do that step, ideally if they want to rebuild after this devastation, they may be forced to having to file a bankruptcy to rid themselves of the judgment.
That's correct.
That's why, going back to the client that we currently have or had that Dennis was mentioning earlier, the house is actually falling apart. He's on Social Security. And while we understand, the attachment to the house, even if we were able to work something out with the bank, that doesn't leave him the money for the repairs for the house. So the house is going to continue to decline, and over time just wind up, being a burden down the road.
We say you don't want to trip over the dollar to get to the penny, right?
Yeah,
sometimes you have to just, put an end to the scenario, which is not always comforting, but I think that there should be comfort in the fact that when somebody goes to a professional, they are there to, again, we spoke about this with our previous guest. These types of scenarios are personal and emotional, and somebody from the outside stepping in to help them make good decisions is the best thing that we can offer. So if somebody wants to reach out and ask questions about short sales, foreclosures, real estate transactions, how do they get in touch with you?
We will do free consultations with anybody on this and describe their options to them, so it's not something where you have to worry about the money coming in. But they can call our office at 516-500-7711. And my website is gomklaw.com.
I love it. Until next time, stay tuned. Bringing on another guest.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.